I'm going to try to be efficient for you all, though the background for the Maine Green Energy Alliance really involves a couple of years of history. But I'm going to try and go through that very quickly. And if anyone wants to circle back with questions for further detail of any aspect of it, I'm happy to answer any of those questions at any time. In April of 2009, the mayor of the city of Biddeford asked the then governor of the state of Maine to establish a task force to look at ways to close down the Maine Energy Recovery Company waste-to-energy facility in downtown Biddeford. That task force was comprised of the owners of that facility, along with municipal officials and state officials to try and work at that. Lo and behold, after several months of meeting weekly in the mayor's office in Biddeford, that group was able to arrive at consensus on a plan to dramatically transform the facility and the regional energy plan in that area. And this was the first time that those parties had been able to come to consensus and collaboration on a plan. Because they were an ad hoc group meeting only weekly, they concluded they needed assistance to help implement their plan. Their plan had multiple parts. It included converting the waste-to-energy facility to a combined heat and power facility and capture the waste heat that currently goes into the atmosphere and into the river for the purpose of cooling and heating downtown mill buildings. They intended to remove the front-end processing out of downtown Biddeford. That was going to result in 50% less truck traffic, 50% smaller footprint. They intended to work with partner communities to get their homeowners and business owners to make their homes as energy and businesses as energy efficient as possible. And as a part of incentive to do that, there was an effort to try and aggregate the demand within those partner communities and to offer electricity at a discounted rate to those people who joined a community energy group, an aggregated group, and made energy efficiency improvements to their properties. In late August of 2009, I was approached by the task force. I interviewed with the task force, and in September I was hired to represent the task force because there were regulatory issues, legal issues, potential legislative issues, and funding issues all associated with trying to develop the roadmap or the plan that they had all agreed upon. In October, the task force publicly announced the plan at City Hall in Biddeford, and right at that same time, the federal government came out with a funding opportunity announcement, the Retrofit Ramp-Up Grant Award, grant process, which the task force read and was struck that it appeared it had been designed for exactly the type of thing that this task force was trying to do. It was trying to incentivize game-changing energy plans. It wanted partnerships between for-profit and non-profit entities, partnerships with municipal government and state government. So funding was one of the principal challenges identified in moving this plan forward, and all of a sudden there was a lot of excitement around this opportunity to find funding. So the task force went to work preparing an application, and in doing that, authorized me to establish a not-for-profit entity who could actually be the entity, and that was the creation of the Maine Green Energy Alliance. Not-for-profits could apply for this grant, municipalities could apply for the grant, the state could apply for the grant. As the application, as we were nearing completion of our application, we began discussions with people who were preparing the state's application, and the conclusion was it would be better to have one consolidated application rather than two separate applications, and a consolidated application was submitted on December 14th. That application ended up receiving one of the highest scores in the nation and received one of the largest awards in the nation. The application that was put in hinged in a significant part on a PACE program, a Property Assessed Clean Energy Financing Program to help homeowners finance energy efficiency improvements. The state of Maine did not have enabling legislation that authorized these programs. So this was acknowledged by the grant applicants in their grant, but an immediate task was to get PACE enabling legislation through. The members of this committee, who were also members of this committee in the 124th, remember the process around passing the PACE legislation. There were multiple work sessions. There was a whole lot of stakeholder process and negotiation. It resulted in a unanimous vote from this committee, a unanimous passage enactment in the House and the Senate. And the result was a unique piece of law across the country, because what it did was to address concerns of some of the municipalities and to address concerns of the lending institutions. It subordinated the PACE lien that's associated with the loan. That was unique, and subsequently Federal Housing Authority sent out a decree that Freddie Mae and Fannie Mac would not be underwriting any loans that had a PACE loan associated with it unless that PACE loan was subordinated to the primary loans. So Maine passed that law. Shortly after this legislature passed the law, the DOE grant award was made to Maine, was announced, and a series of conference calls began with the de-scoping team, is what they call themselves, from the Department of Energy, to finalize the grant award because Maine was granted an amount less than what it applied for. So they began to cram down components of it. In that process, the Maine Green Energy Alliance focus got crammed down too, to a focus on working with partner communities, working to educate and promote the PACE loan product, and working from the community to drive demand for the rebate program that the state had in place. A significant fact I haven't touched upon is the city of Biddeford, by February of 2010, had pulled back from the plan. So the Maine Green Energy Alliance's plan no longer had the Biddeford focus and had been, again, refined down to this community effort and community partner effort.
So let me interrupt you right there.
Sure.
How did that work? Obviously, the original grant focused on the Biddeford project. Did you have to, when they sent back a reduced amount for the grant, did you have to submit paperwork to the grant writers, the federal
Yes. Yep.
agent, whoever it was, and did they have to approve
They did.
change in the scope of the work?
They did, and it was through these conference calls and then visits by DOE to Augusta where a revised plan, not just for the Maine Green Energy Alliance, but for the whole grant award, was revised with the DOE. They, in fact, Senator, encouraged the Maine Green Energy Alliance reducing its focus to this community effort, because there were models out there of we need to get these programs beyond Augusta, beyond the state capitals, and into the communities, and we need efforts to try and figure out how to crack the nut of driving the demand. And this discussion had been going on around the country, and there was a model in Washington, D.C. called the D.C. Project. I think DOE was encouraging this refinement too, and the Maine Green Energy Alliance's continuation, because we had partner communities that we were working with, and because we had as good a knowledge as anyone on how Maine's PACE law was just established and how it could be implemented. So by May, all of that was finalized with DOE. At that time, Maine Green Energy Alliance really began to push and to prod Efficiency Maine to figure out how to get a PACE product out onto the street as quickly as possible. We were already working with communities that were interested in adopting PACE ordinances. So while we were trying to assist and pushing and prodding with Efficiency Maine, we were also out there with communities trying to get them set so that when the PACE product was on the street, their residents would be able to benefit. So by July, we had 2 communities who adopted the first 2 PACE ordinances in the state. I drafted the ordinances for those communities. That ordinance became the model for the state effort, and they're now, Maine Green Energy Alliance was responsible for the first 6 communities that adopted PACE. There are now over 50, and they use the model that grew out of the ordinance that I drafted for the towns of Hamden and Old Town.
Mr. Chairman, can I have clarification?
Representative
How were those towns selected, sir? The 6 towns? Was it based on need? Was it based on mean income? How was that done?
There were actually 8 communities that were our first 8 partner communities and really pilot communities to go test some models in. And they were chosen based on demographic diversity and regional diversity. So those 8 communities were in 5 different counties. They stretched from Old Town down to Scarborough and from Buckfield over to Belfast. The median incomes in those towns varied from the high 20s to the mid-60s or low 60s. And again, there was geographical spread.
If I may, one of the key things that we were looking when we selected these 8 communities is we were looking, this was intended to be a 3-year effort.
Is it 6 or 8?
It was 8, sorry, 8. Did I say 6? Sorry. These 8 communities was we wanted to develop a model that could actually be rolled out to communities throughout the state. And as we're doing that, we recognize that what you're going to be facing in small towns is going to be very different from large towns in western Maine, northern Maine, very different from southern Maine, from wealthier communities, poorer communities. We needed to look and try the program in multiple types of communities to figure out what was working and what wasn't before we would go and roll it out more broadly. And that was our goal for the first 6 to 8 months, was really to test that in pilot communities.
Mr. Murray, maybe you could introduce yourself, because we have probably had people that are listening in on the internet who may not realize who was speaking.
My apologies. Yeah, this is Seth Murray. I'm the Executive Director of the Maine Green Energy Alliance.
Excellent, thank you.